Love isn't supposed to kill you. But for Lillian Graves, love was a slow, suffocating trap, one that ended with her body shattered on the rocks below Raven Heights Bridge. The 911 call came in at 12:47 a.m. A woman had fallen. When paramedics arrived, the rain had turned the dirt road slick, making it hard to navigate. The bridge loomed over the river, its rusted metal railings barely visible in the darkness. Then they spotted her. Lillian Graves, 23 years old. Her body was a broken silhouette against the jagged riverbed, limbs twisted unnaturally. Her blonde hair clung to her face, damp from the rain. She wasn't breathing. Her skin was already cold. She had been dead for at least an hour. A few meters away, standing near the edge of the bridge, was the only witness, Noah Vance. His clothes were soaked, his chest rising and falling as he tried to steady his breathing. His hands were shaking, but not from the cold. She slipped. His voice cracked when the officers reached him. I tried to grab her, but she just fell. The story should have made sense. It had been raining. The bridge was dangerous. Lillian had been drinking earlier, maybe she lost her balance. But then they saw the bruises. Dark fingerprints circling her wrists as if someone had grabbed her. Fingernails chipped, skin beneath them scratched raw, like she had fought to hold on. Her phone was found a few meters away, the screen cracked but still glowing. And on it was a text message sent at 12:39 a.m. If anything happens to me tonight, it was Noah. Noah and Lillian had been inseparable since high school. He was the confident one, the golden boy everyone in town admired. She was the girl with dreams too big for their quiet little town. They were the couple people envied, the ones who danced at prom like they were the only two in the room, the ones who swore they'd be together forever. But what no one saw was the way Noah needed to own her. It started small, casual questions about her friends, gentle suggestions about what she should wear. Then it became rules. Who she could talk to, where she could go, what time she should be home. At first she laughed it off. He just worries about me, she'd say. It's sweet. Then came the outbursts, the holes in the walls. The nights she went home with red marks on her wrists. The first time he pushed her, he apologized for hours. The second time he swore it would never happen again. The third time she told no one. Her best friend Mara was the only one who noticed the change. The way Lillian flinched when Noah spoke too loudly. The way she always seemed exhausted, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. You need to leave him, Mara had begged one night. Lillian had just given her a sad smile. It's not that simple. Now it was too late. The detective arrived on the scene just as Noah was being questioned. He kept running his hands through his hair, eyes darting around like he was searching for the right thing to say. I loved her, he kept repeating. I would never hurt her. But love didn't explain the bruises. It didn't explain the text. And it sure as hell didn't explain the fact that Noah had scratches on his arms, fresh, deep ones. Officer Patel glanced down at Lillian's body. A sick feeling curled in her stomach. Something about this wasn't right. She looked at Noah again, watching the way he swallowed hard, the way his eyes flickered between the bridge and the paramedics below. He wasn't grieving. He was panicking. She slipped, he had said. But the truth? The truth was far worse. The police escorted Noah Vance to the station for further questioning. He didn't resist. He didn't demand a lawyer. He just sat in the back of the patrol car, staring blankly at his hands, as if trying to scrub something invisible from his skin. Detective Patel knew the look. It wasn't grief. It was calculation. A man replaying his own story in his head, making sure there were no loose ends. By the time they reached the station, news had already spread. Lillian Graves was dead. The girl who once lit up every room she walked into was now just another tragic headline. The town was whispering, speculating. And at the heart of it all was the boy they had once adored. Inside the interrogation room, Noah sat with his head in his hands. The artificial light overhead cast sharp shadows across his face, making him look older, harder. I already told you what happened, he said when Patel took a seat across from him. We were arguing. She got upset. She turned to walk away and she slipped. The detective didn't respond right away. She just pulled a folder from the desk, flipping it open with deliberate slowness. The crime scene photos stared back at her. Lillian's lifeless body. The bruises on her arms. The message on her phone. Explain this, she finally said, sliding the image of the text toward him. Noah hesitated. It was brief, but Patel caught it, the way his jaw tightened, his fingers twitching. I don't know, he said. She was drunk. Maybe she was just being dramatic. Patel leaned forward. Or maybe she was scared. Noah let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You don't understand. Lillian, she was emotional. She said things she didn't mean all the time. She was always accusing me of what? Patel cut in. Silence. Noah clenched his jaw, staring down at the table. Look, I loved her, he said finally. I would never hurt her. Patel didn't believe him. She had seen real grief before, the kind that cracked a person open, left them shaking, struggling to breathe. That wasn't what this was. This was something else. Then you won't mind if we go through your phone? Patel said, leaning back in her chair. Just to verify your version of events? Noah's head snapped up. For the first time since the interview started, true panic flickered in his eyes. And that was all the confirmation Patel needed. Back at the crime scene, officers continued combing through the area, searching for anything that might tell them the truth. The rain had washed away a lot, but not everything. One of the officers, a rookie named Harris, called out from near the bridge's railing. Detective, you might want to see this. Patel arrived moments later, her stomach twisting as she saw what he was pointing at. Scratched into the rusted metal of the railing, faint but unmistakable, were 3 letters. Inoue. Lillian's last act. Her final message to the world. Patel's blood ran cold. Lillian hadn't slipped. She had been holding on. Fighting. Trying to leave behind the name of the person who had sent her to her death. Noah hadn't just watched her fall. He had let go. And now, it was only a matter of time before he ran out of lies. That night, as Noah sat alone in his holding cell, he pulled his knees to his chest, gripping his arms tightly. He had always been good at talking his way out of trouble. He had convinced Lillian to stay when she wanted to leave, convinced her friends that everything was fine. But this time he wasn't sure he could talk his way out of a ghost. Noah didn't sleep that night. He sat in the cold, dimly lit holding cell, his mind replaying every detail, every word he had said. He thought he had covered his tracks well. He thought he had control. But that damn message. If anything happens to me tonight, it was Noah. And now the name scratched into the railing. He didn't know she had done that. His heartbeat pounded against his ribs. He needed a way out. Morning came, and with it his lawyer, Philip Baines, the best money could buy. Noah's father, a retired judge, had wasted no time pulling strings. They wouldn't charge him. They had no solid evidence. That was the story Noah kept repeating to himself. When Detective Patel walked into the room, her expression was unreadable. She placed a thick file on the table between them. Sleep well? She asked, knowing the answer. Noah said nothing. Patel flipped open the file. We ran Lillian's autopsy overnight. Cause of death was blunt force trauma from the fall, but here's the thing. She was already injured before she went over that railing. Noah swallowed but kept his expression still. She had bruising on her ribs, her arms. Some were fresh, some older. Tell me, Noah, how does someone get bruises like that? Philip Baines cleared his throat. My client doesn't have to answer that. Of course he doesn't, Patel said, closing the file. But here's the problem. We pulled Noah's phone records. Turns out he called Lillian 6 times the night she died. She ignored all of them, except the last one. Noah clenched his jaw. 1 minute after that call, she sent that text. Patel's voice was sharp now. 1 minute, Noah? Noah's hands curled into fists beneath the table. She was paranoid, he said, his voice low. She was drinking. She probably... Save it? Patel leaned forward. Here's what I think happened. You called her. You told her to meet you at the bridge. Maybe you promised it was just to talk. Maybe you told her you were sorry. But that wasn't why you were there, was it? Silence. You two argued. Maybe she told you it was over. Maybe she told you she was done covering for you, done pretending everything was fine. And that scared you, didn't it? Noah stared at her, his breathing shallow. She fought back. Noah. That's why you've got scratches on your arms. That's why her wrists were bruised. But the biggest mistake you made? Patel's eyes locked onto his. You thought she was gone before she hit the ground? Noah's lips parted, but no words came out. She wasn't. Patel placed a photo on the table, the letters NOA barely visible on the rusted railing. She tried to tell us who did it. Noah's entire body stiffened. The room felt smaller, the air too thick. He needed to get out. Philip Baines shifted in his chair. Detective, unless you're formally charging my client? Oh, we will, Patel cut in. You just bought him a few more hours of freedom. But know this, Noah. She stood, smoothing out her blazer. You're running out of lies. And when that happens, I'll be waiting. She turned to leave but paused at the door. One last thing, she said without looking back. If you really loved her, you wouldn't be sitting here trying to cover your tracks. You'd be telling the truth. The door shut behind her. Noah exhaled, his fingers digging into his temples. For the first time in his life, he had no idea what to do next. Lillian's funeral was set for the following day. The town was still in shock, reeling from the whispers that had begun to circulate. Mara stood outside Lillian's childhood home, her hands clenched at her sides. She had been Lillian's best friend since they were kids. She had seen the warning signs, had tried to warn her. But Lillian had stayed. And now she was gone. Mara turned when she heard footsteps behind her. Detective Patel. I need to ask you something, Patel said. Mara nodded, her throat tight. Did Lillian ever tell you she was afraid of Noah? Mara swallowed hard. Not in those words, she whispered. But she didn't have to. Patel studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Thank you, she said. We're going to get him, Mara. I promise. Mara looked down at her hands. I hope so, she murmured. Because he doesn't deserve to walk free. She didn't say the rest out loud. And if the police don't stop him, maybe I will. Noah walked out of the police station later that evening, his father at his side, his lawyer just a step behind. The weight of eyes followed him. Officers, reporters, even random bystanders who had heard the whispers. He killed her. He kept his head down, his jaw clenched. His father barely said a word as they slipped into the black SUV waiting outside. The door slammed shut, locking the world out. What the hell have you done? His father finally said, voice low but sharp. Noah didn't answer. He could still hear Detective Patel's voice in his head. She wasn't gone before she hit the ground. He swallowed hard. His father exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. You will not embarrass this family. Do you understand me? I don't care what happened that night. If there's no proof, there's no case. Noah finally looked up. There's proof? His voice was hoarse. The text. The scratches. The railing? Then you keep your mouth shut, his father cut in. You're not a criminal, Noah. You made a mistake. That's all this is. And mistakes? They can be erased. Noah wasn't sure if he believed that anymore. Mara stood at the edge of the churchyard, gripping a handful of dirt between her fingers. Lillian's funeral was small, quiet, but not peaceful. There was an energy in the air, a mix of sorrow and rage. Because everyone knew. Noah was there, standing at a distance with his father, his lawyer. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even pretending to. Mara's nails dug into her palm. I should have done more, she whispered. Beside her, Lillian's mother let out a choked sob, clutching her husband's arm as they lowered the coffin into the ground. Noah's eyes flickered to Mara then. Their gazes met. Mara didn't blink. She wanted him to know. I see you. Noah shifted uncomfortably, looking away. Good. You should be scared. Because if the police didn't stop him, she would. Detective Patel sat in her office that night, reviewing the evidence for the 100th time. Everything pointed to Noah. The bruises. The scratches. The text message. But it wasn't enough. She needed a witness. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She answered, half expecting a reporter. But then. I saw what happened that night. Patel straightened in her chair. Who is this? A shaky breath on the other end. I was there. I saw him push her. Patel's pulse spiked. Where can we meet? Pause. Then. Now. But I can't go to the station. It's not safe. Patel grabbed her coat. Tell me where. The diner was nearly empty when Patel arrived. The rain outside had driven most people home, leaving only the hum of an old radio and the smell of burnt coffee. A girl sat in the back booth, hood up, fingers tapping anxiously against the table. Patel slid into the seat across from her. You said you saw what happened, she said, keeping her voice steady. The girl, Jessie Lane, high school senior, part-time waitress at the bar near the bridge, nodded. I was leaving work late that night, Jessie whispered. I saw Lillian's car parked near the bridge. I thought about stopping, but something felt wrong. What do you mean? Patel pressed. Jessie's hands tightened around her coffee cup. I heard them arguing. I couldn't hear everything, but she was crying. She kept saying, I can't do this anymore. And Noah? Jessie swallowed hard. He said, if I can't have you, no one will. The hairs on Patel's arms stood up. Did you see what happened next? Jessie nodded. I saw them struggle. She tried to walk away and he grabbed her wrist. She tried to pull back, but he shoved her. Hard. And she fell? Patel's voice was barely above a whisper. Jessie's eyes filled with tears. I thought she was going to get up. But she didn't. Silence stretched between them. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Patel finally asked. Jesse exhaled shakily. Because I was scared. He's Noah Vance. His family owns half this town. And if they find out I'm the one who, she stopped, wiping at her eyes. But then I saw his face at the funeral. He wasn't even sad. And I can't let him get away with it. Patel reached across the table, gripping Jesse's trembling hands. You're doing the right thing. Jessie nodded, but her fear was still there, sitting between them like a shadow. Patel knew they had their break. A witness. A confession. But now came the hardest part, making sure Noah didn't walk free. Because men like him? They always found a way to slip through the cracks. Not this time. Detective Patel wasted no time. Within the hour, Jesse Lane's statement was officially recorded, and a warrant was secured. The evidence was airtight now, Lillian's text message, the bruises, the scratches, and now an eyewitness. Noah Vance had run out of places to hide. At exactly 3:14 a.m., officers arrived at his house. The mansion was dark except for a single light in his bedroom window. Patel knocked, her patience razor-thin. After a long silence, Noah's father opened the door. He looked half-dressed, his tie loose, his expression unreadable. "It's late, detective," he said coolly. "Not too late for justice," Patel replied, holding up the warrant. "We're here for your son." Noah's father sighed through his nose but didn't step aside. "This is a mistake." "No," Patel said, her voice sharper now. "The mistake was thinking he could get away with murder." Heavy footsteps echoed from the staircase, and then there he was, Noah. He wasn't handcuffed yet, but he already looked like a prisoner. His face was drawn, his eyes hollow. "What's this?" he asked, voice barely above a whisper. "Noah Vance, you're under arrest for the murder of Lillian Graves," Patel said. For a second, Noah didn't move. Then he laughed. A quiet, bitter sound like he finally understood how this would end. His father stepped forward, voice cold. "We'll fight this." Patel held his gaze. "Good luck." The cuffs clicked shut around Noah's wrists. For the first time he didn't fight. The courtroom was packed. Journalists, townspeople, students who had once called Noah and Lillian their dream couple. Now they whispered about him like he was a stranger. Mara sat in the front row, hands clenched in her lap. Jesse was beside her, pale but determined. The prosecutor presented the case with brutal precision. The text message. The scratches. The bruises. The railing. Jesse's testimony. Piece by piece, the illusion of Noah Vance, the golden boy, the perfect boyfriend, crumbled. Noah's father had hired the best defense money could buy, but the jury wasn't blind. They saw the truth. And when the verdict was read, guilty, Mara finally exhaled. Noah didn't react. He just sat there, staring at his hands as if still trying to scrub Lillian's blood from his skin. As he was led away, his eyes flickered to Mara. She didn't blink. Noah Vance was going to prison. And Lillian? Lillian was finally free. The graveyard was quiet, the kind of stillness that felt heavy with memories. Mara knelt beside Lillian's headstone, placing a single white rose on the grass. "I miss you," she whispered. "But you don't have to be afraid anymore." The wind stirred the leaves around her feet. Somewhere, maybe, Lillian was listening. And finally she could rest. Lillian Graves should have had a future. She should have been able to walk away. But in the end, love wasn't enough to save her. And while justice was served, the truth is, there are still too many stories like hers. Too many voices silenced before they get the chance to escape. If this story resonated with you, let's keep the conversation going. Have you ever seen the warning signs in a relationship? Do you think justice was truly served in this case? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want more gripping true crime stories like this, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications. Because every story deserves to be told. Until next time, stay safe,